What is consciousness? The live stream of consciousness is on a quest to unravel the mysteries of existence. Every episode, we ask the fundamental question that has captivated human minds for centuries. Is consciousness merely a product of our brains, or does it connect us to something greater? Explore the very fabric of our thoughts. Don't miss a moment. Expand your awareness and tap into the boundless potential that resides within you. Welcome to the live stream of consciousness.
Yes, welcome to the live stream of consciousness, take 2. All right, let's talk about the multiverse right here for a second and realize that I hit the button and I thought that I was live, and I started my show and I thought I was connected to all of you guys, and I introduced the show and I introduced my guest, and then I'm like, it's kind of quiet out there. I saw a couple of comments, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I don't think I'm live, and I don't think I've ever actually done that. So if you hung in there and you're still there, thank you for believing that I will be here. I have been here every Thursday just about for the last couple of years. It's November 16th. I was in the first universe. This is a different universe than you guys have experienced because you weren't here for it. But in the first universe, I talked about November 16th and how it's almost the end of the year and all of these things that happened that you guys didn't experience, but me and my guest experienced it. So anyway, possibilities of a multiverse and multiple timelines happening there. Welcome. I see Tim is out there. I was explaining to my guest that Tim is our Brazilian representative, and Ninja Kitty's out there. Thank you guys for hanging in there for me. I am excited tonight. I also mentioned in the other universe that this guest, I tried something different with this guest. Helen, what's happening? You love the multiverse. In the other universe, and Grace Grella, I see you out there too. I was and now I forgot what I was saying. In the other universe, I was talking to my guest in the other universe. And anyway, I'm going to welcome my guest to this universe and to your universe, and now we're all connected again. And welcome to the live stream of consciousness, David Schock. What's happening?
Hey, Michael. How are we? Hi again. Yeah.
Hi again. That was interesting, wasn't it? We were having a blast. You were about to tell me, you were starting to tell me all about consciousness, and I was like, oh, wait a second. I don't think we're actually connected. I didn't feel everybody. So we were here. And Grace, always thank you for watching on both platforms. Hit the comment or the like or something in there, and let's get that algorithm going. Let's get put into other people's feeds.
Tim, how are you, man?
Tim is saying hello, and yes, in another galaxy far away, that's where we were. But now we're back.
Yeah.
And anyway, what I was saying was that I did something a little different. David and I actually we did meet this week, and we just decided to have a little conversation and get to know each other a little bit. Whereas a lot of times, if it's a guest that I haven't met, I'll just like experience it live with everybody. But I'm glad that we did that. I also remember, David, I was talking about reflection, seeing my reflection in the world around me, and that most people, most of the time, I get excited because I'm like, oh, I see my reflection in like a homeless guy or something that's like very different than my existence. But you and me, I feel like we're bros. I feel like we we can hang out and just chill and have a good conversation, which we already did. I see Michelle Werner is out there.
Hey, Michelle. Hey, sweetheart.
Welcome. Thank you for coming to the show. Please subscribe if you like what you see, and
stick your old friend,
and all that. Awesome, very good. Thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing your friends along with you.
Yeah.
So let's get to the business, which we started to get to, and I know you love the conversation too. So, what is consciousness here on the live stream of consciousness?
There's one of the things I've studied for many years called the Way of Mastery. That, and the two big things I've sort of, a lot of the things I do come out, or that and the Course in Miracles, which is pretty well known. And in one of them it says, we do not know what anything is or is for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like this incredibly humbling sort of statement. I don't know what anything is or is for, like, boom. And then to kind of go on to explain how You know, there's grass growing, you can't hear it. There's a child just been born, you're unaware of it. You know, and so many things where you have such limited perspectives. So the way I like to think is, when it comes to things like consciousness, or when we're talking about spirituality or meaning or whatever we're talking about, existence, we're talking about sort of the way things are, yeah, the way, the nature of stuff. And my definition of, I think everybody believes in God, they just call it different things. It's whatever they think is powerful. That's their God. So the answer, what's consciousness, this thing of, does it come out of the brain? Yeah, is it an experience we're having that's an extension of material processes? Yeah, physical cause,
Right.
or is what was happening? Are we non-physical spiritual beings? That's what spirituality means, I think. And we don't know. The truth is, I don't think anybody can honestly say they know that.
Right.
Not everybody's honest about that. Some people have really strong opinions and present that as knowing, but we don't know.
Right.
But I think what we can know is that there are consequences to either position. So if you believe in materiality, which is increasingly, I think, in a lot of cultures, that's become, the Silicon Valley culture is very that way, with the whole AI thing happening. The idea that you know, that everything will be explained in material terms eventually.
Right.
I think what people don't understand, or haven't really taken the time to understand the implications of, if that's true, is that there is no meaning, because everything's predetermined. We don't have choice. Love isn't real. And none of the stuff that we think of as real and meaningful exists at all. So it's kind of like this, I don't mean to sound dramatic here, but it's like a death theology. And people think, oh, well, it's scientific and it's meaningful because there's been a lot of dogma in religion, and science seems to, you know, help balance that off and be more helpful and more real and more genuine. But science is also the only reason that we might be potentially destroying ourselves. Right. And if it wasn't for science, we wouldn't have global warming. If it wasn't for science, we wouldn't have nuclear weapons. If it wasn't for science, we wouldn't be able to fight wars the way we do.
Sure, that makes sense. That does make sense.
So science is a dual-edged sword. And one of the sharpest and most damaging swords that comes, edge that comes from that, is this belief in materiality. Because ultimately, it's a meaningless belief, no matter what someone's experience might be. There's no free will. There's only, we're just very complex billiard balls, you know, whatever you want to call it, cause and effect chains. And there's no freedom and no meaning, period. And I think that people don't really take the time to understand the sort of the hell of that. And I think
so I'm a little confused here. Are these the things that you're saying that you subscribe to, or you're saying?
No, I'm saying that we don't
most
know.
people subscribe to.
Let's look at the consequences of each belief system.
Okay, I got you. Okay, I'm back.
We're looking at the consequence of one of the belief systems now.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if we don't really get thorough about looking at the belief system and its consequences, then we don't really know what we're doing.
Right.
In terms of choosing between one or the other.
Right.
So, and there's a lot of support for this idea. I actually spent a long time struggling with this when I was young, this idea that, well, if there isn't free will, there's no meaning. And it's really hard to say why there would be free will.
Right. And your description of billiard balls kind of, you know, that kind of describes that existence, what that would.
Yeah, there's a book, this is 100 years ago now, but Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance deals with this a lot. You know, that this crushing meaninglessness, if you do take this purely materialistic scientific view of reality. Right. There are external things causing your events, and that becomes this this prison of causality that we can't get out of. We don't have any power in that world whatsoever.
Right.
But people
Right.
don't take the time to really understand that that's the consequence of that belief. They think it's somehow a liberating belief. It isn't at all. It's a crushingly, anyhow. I haven't talked about this in ages, actually. So the alternative is that, well,
Well,
they're
wait,
kind
can I stop you before you go to the alternative? Because there's something
of,
about what you, I was just writing a note because I wanted to make sure I spoke about it. So this belief system, and something I want to get into with you is about religion and all of that stuff. But this belief system, what came up for me in my head was the tree of knowledge, like
Mhm.
how eating from the tree of knowledge, what was, we weren't supposed to do it, and
Well,
almost
this is right in my wheelhouse. So let's, keep
yeah,
going. Yeah.
yeah. You almost described, well, there's the reason that you wouldn't, like, there's the reason science is bad, right? Then it's knowledge, but it's too much because it gives you the knowledge to do things that aren't necessarily good for you or the world around you.
Yeah, I'll present a radically different interpretation of what eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil means.
Okay.
So if we're going to look at another perspective, which I think is alluded to in all wisdom traditions, in all religions and spiritualities that I've been aware of, even in popular culture, in Disney and in
Mhm,
Star Wars and everything,
mhm,
um, is this idea that, well, the alternative universe is one in which we actually are free
mhm,
and we're spiritual beings,
mhm,
and that we have the power to cause experience.
mhm,
Right, so we have there's one universe in which we have freedom and one in which we absolutely don't.
mhm.
So my point would be, once you really understand the brutality of the one in which you don't, there's no point whatsoever in continuing to entertain that theology as being possibly true, because it only leads to this endless nothing.
Right.
But people don't kind of like really get to the point where they
Right,
have.
right, right. I got you. Okay. So now I get what you were getting at that whole time. Yep, yep.
Yeah, so that's the whole lead up here, is we put that one away because it's useless.
Right,
There's nothing good to come out of it.
right,
It
right.
doesn't mean there isn't good to come out of science and logic and all that stuff, but this idea that it's material, like the Big Bang was a physical event and everything's happening in a causal chain of material cause,
Right,
empirical universe, all that,
right,
Newtonian or quantum physics or whatever, something outside affecting you. Yeah. That is a
right,
loser in the end.
right,
So the alternative is a spiritual reality in which you're free.
right.
So if we want to go back to your story of the Garden of Eden, yeah, taking on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
So I'll sort of create the theology, the only theology that I've ever found that actually was meaningful for me. It took me 20 something years to really sort of cement it, but now it's really in place and has been for a long time.
Hmm, hmm,
And it grew out of the course and the way of mastery and some other things.
hmm.
So if our best reality is one in which there is a loving creator and an all-powerful, all-loving creator.
Hmm.
To me, that just makes sense. So I run
Sure,
with that.
sure.
But then the question obviously is, well, how can we explain all of the suffering?
Right.
This old question.
Not my question, but the first question most people ask.
It's a question people ask. We'll get
Yeah,
to what's consciousness, I think, is part of this too.
yeah, yeah.
But okay, so how do you explain the suffering? Well, you explain the suffering through, people will say, free will, right? But when people talk about free will, I think they're making a crucial error, because free will does not mean separate beings making autonomous, separate choices.
Hmm.
Free will means that we are free to see and to be in harmony and in alignment with the expression of life that's occurring,
Hmm.
or we are free to be unaware of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what will be generated will be quite different. So, like, if I'm going to try to summarize this thought system, way of thinking about things real quickly, where we are as souls, or whatever you want to call it, as spiritual beings, unique loving thoughts in the mind of God is a beautiful way I've heard it expressed, what we
I
are.
love that. Yeah.
We have the choice to, we can go to the multiplex, and there are a billion movies, and we can pick the one we want to. We didn't create the multiplex, but we're free to create our experience. And And in fact, we and we alone create all and every aspect of our experience, period. That's the theory. So that's kind of a radical thing to start with. Like, people are saying, oh, you're blaming the victim. Well, no, you're not. You're saying there aren't any.
Right.
And it doesn't matter age. It doesn't matter. So this is an absolute kind of way of looking at things. And I don't sell it. I just say I think that it's worth thinking about.
Right.
Because
we're going to come back to that, by the way. That was one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah, well, we'll get back. We'll do anything you like. So like I rarely talk about this sort of a summary, but it's fun to do it. So you create experience based on what you choose to put your attention on. Now, if you look at my thumb, and then look at your microphone, and then look at your right knee, whether you choose to do that or not, you see that quickly you affirm the fact that you have the choice, the power to decide what you put your attention on.
Right.
So that's how we generate experience, is what we choose to put our attention on.
Wow. So such a simple, I love that. Sorry, I had to stop you. That's such a simple, because if you can make that connection, which I think not everybody will be able to, but if you can make that connection to what you just asked me to do, to that's just a microcosm of your life, right? And everything that you decide to do, right? And pursue, and
and everything in this theology, thought system, everything you're experiencing is a result of the previous choices you've made, sort of the soup of consciousness that you have put together based on your previous choices of what to look at and what to put your attention on, what type of belief to think in. And the world is literally a projection of that. There's the old Star Trek Next Generation, where they had the holodeck, they'd put the little CD in the wall and they'd go in and then they'd be in that world.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Only we're the one, our consciousness, our mind is generating the script of that CD.
I love it.
And what's happening right now. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say you've actually, I think you win for the longest answer, but like really there was so much information in that answer, and so many things that we can talk about. So I do want to just acknowledge a couple of people in the chat room there. Tim said this a while ago. I was blushing a little bit, but it's funny. I'm sure every version of Michael in the multiverse is just as awesome. Helen says, we don't know because we are all things we choose to perceive, which is exactly where the conversation went before we were even talking about that. And then Helen says, we as individuals are limited in the answers we find to those questions by our perception and perspective. She's so wise. And I think just like Helen, a lot of us have this knowledge and wisdom, but it's hard to apply it to ourselves. We can help other people by telling them, which is what I find all the time, but it's very hard to do it to yourself. Grace, where the energy goes, consciousness flows. Absolutely. And then Helen says, the more evolved, or perhaps even the better one's vocabulary and knowledge of philosophy or even imagination, the more intense their belief. Interesting. Yes. So each of us are limited to different degrees of comprehension. Absolutely. And we talk about different levels of consciousness here sometimes, and kind of awareness. And then we have the classic Tim pumping in with, energy cannot be created or destroyed, just transformed. Therefore we are eternal, which is, again, some of these things that are actually scientifically proven, right, are such the basic knowledge of existence. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense, and that explains so much. So, and then Helen is saying, because words come to me that I don't even understand. I find that also, and a lot of times it gets easier and easier to do. It's more of a feeling than a word, right? It's just like we were talking about this earlier this week about language and what a limited set of a limited tool it is, for us to communicate. And especially things that we feel, right? There are some things that you feel that you just can't explain what it means to
I
you and
heard,
how it
heard,
motivates
heard,
you.
heard a fascinating thing yesterday for the first time. It was on a Christian station. I happened to be going through the radio, and they were saying that when the one of the translations of the Bible was put into English, this may have been like one of the first translation of the Bible into English from
Mhm.
Latin. They said that 1,100 words were used for the first time in print. That the language had to expand in
Wow.
order to encapsulate the ideas they were trying to express from the Latin.
Wow.
So the formation of the English language itself was influenced by trying to transmit the frequency of the ideas of the Bible, which I think stuff like that's fascinating.
That's
That
yeah, totally. I love that. That's amazing. And Grace says, great song, More Than a Feeling.
yeah,
Totally.
you're right.
Totally.
Yeah,
Well, man, I have so many things I want to talk about with you. But I do want to ask you, there is a second part that I always usually ask my guests to share.
yeah.
And I certainly feel like you are on the same page as far as believing, what other depth there is to existence that isn't really spoken about in the mainstream or education. And so my question is, do you have a memory of when you realized that, like the first time you realized, like, wait a second, I thought everything was this way, but I have this sense, or I know, or maybe you experienced something?
Something that shifted dramatically.
Yeah, where you're kind of like, wait a second, it's more than just, like you were saying, and I don't want to forget this. You were talking about how, I think we're taught in school that life is a series of chemical reactions happening in your brain and electrical impulses, right? And that doesn't really get into what consciousness is and what we're talking about here. You know what I mean? So, like, when did that's what I'm talking about. When did you like say, wait a second?
Well, I grew up with a mom who was extremely intuitive.
Mhm,
And so it was kind of, I lived with that all the time. So
mhm.
that type of thing was, I think it was adjusting to the world, not understanding that stuff that was the challenge.
Okay.
You know,
So
one thing,
always, you always have been like that. That was
yeah,
one of
no,
the
it's always kind of been there.
yeah.
It was, as I say, it was the world not getting it that was really. People that say ESP doesn't exist. I mean, they haven't spent 20 minutes with my mother. I mean, she passed a few years ago, but she one time, and this is a woman who she was Ivy League educated and started a information center for people with disabilities, world largest in the world that there ever was, I believe,
Wow.
and was a professional woman, is like an educated woman, and but also and she never talked about like psychic stuff. But one day she went into a room and just told three people their birthdays, 1, 2, 3, and was right on all three of them.
Wow. Like
And
on
she
the
said, "Oh,
nose.
that's just one of those things you do."
Wow.
So this is the type of kind of thing that, like, I grew up around, and I don't have any doubt about those things. I've never doubted, that something else is going on, or very almost
Mhm,
never doubted that.
mhm,
When I
mhm.
really got into this, really locked into this belief that maybe this materialistic thing was real, that's when I kind of went into hell for a few years. And
Mm,
but it was interesting investigation
mhm, mhm.
because it leads to some conclusions that then stay with you, that's a dead end, that world and that way of thinking.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I want to get back to it sometime. I don't want, if you want to go another direction, that's cool for now. I do want to circle back to the Garden of Eden thing at some point, if possible, because I think that's a really, you were talking about the
No.
tree of
Let's
knowledge.
talk about that. I know I've got my stuff written down here, so I know you were just tapping on it right now with what you were saying
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
and we talked about it. I think this was one of the last things you said to me before we left, that we talked about conditioning, and I think that's related to what you're saying. But
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
talk.
conditioning. Well, the thing about it is, so this shows up in the Course of Miracles and in the Way of Mastery. It's the first teaching of the Way of Mastery. It's called the first axiom. I and I alone am responsible for every aspect of my creation. Nothing at all ever happens to me, only for me. And I cannot experience anything that I do not choose to attract to myself. And I would add, for some good reason. like there's still not blame there. It's like there's some good reason for all of it. That's the
Right.
piece that's often missing for people. But so if we take this thing about you have the power to determine where you put your attention. Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is it's fantastically sort of the way is simple and without effort. Like the more you see, the more it becomes clear, to in my opinion at least. And there's a woman named Byron Katie who does this brilliant stuff, and her assertion is, when you argue with reality, you suffer, and when you don't, you don't.
Mm.
So in other words, when you put your mind on an unloving thought, things should be different is an unloving thought.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Then you suffer.
mm-hmm.
When you put your mind on a loving thought, again, these thoughts are like things. They're like the thumb or the microphone. They're things.
Mm-hmm,
So you
mm-hmm.
get to decide what you put your attention on, just like what you look at.
Right, right.
If you're entertaining a fearful thought, you will generate a fearful experience. And our minds are powerful enough to create entire worlds in which we believe that all of the things that we're seeing are real and have causative power. We have science, whole stuff created that we can create. We're that smart to make it seem like it's all happening in a very concrete way.
Right.
So when you put your attention on an unloving thought, you suffer.
Right.
When you put your attention on a loving thought, you don't. So let's go back to the story of the Garden of Eden. And let's just say maybe there's a little projection in the retelling of the story or the metaphor. Yeah.
Okay.
So the story is, as I remember it, that Adam and Eve are there and everything's great. And God's there and everything's great. And then God kind of goes, this is really nice. You can do this and you'll stay in heaven. This is really nice. You can do this and you'll stay in heaven, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, but if you do that, you won't stay in heaven.
Right.
The mistake that's made is the idea that interpretation of this is the idea that God could somehow be opposed or disobeyed. An all-loving God and an all-powerful God, that's not a potentiality.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So what could be going on? It's merely a statement of, just so you know what you're dealing with, if you do this, you stay in the awareness of heaven. And if you do this, you stay in the awareness of heaven. But if you do this, you will lose your awareness of heaven. You can't leave heaven. There's a description of Adam falling asleep. He's in heaven when he falls asleep. There's no mention of him waking up. So we are Adam and Eve and whatever, that story, asleep in the dream. Well, what's the dream? We're told what the nature of this false illusory experience is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the knowledge or the belief or the taking on of the perception of good and evil.
Right.
So the idea that the disc that we put in the wall was, I wonder what it'd be like if we lived in a universe in which good and evil both existed. And then we walk into that reality, whereas in fact, only love is real.
Right.
So we're now in this dualistic, good, bad, moralistic, et cetera thing.
Right.
The tree in the Garden of Good and Evil, the snake is meant, the apple represents the senses, the sensory thing, there's a physical thing going on there. And people feel the tree is the spinal column and the snake is the Kundalini energy. So it's all about body identification.
Oh, wow.
When you think you're a body, you will live in a dualistic world because you think what's good for the body is good and what's bad for the body is bad.
Right.
And we extend that to say what's good for our family is good and what's good for our country is good.
Right.
But, these guys are freedom fighters because they're on our side, but they're terrorists if we're on the other side. It's all ridiculously subjective shit. People know this, right?
Yeah.
So when we stop identifying with ourselves as being the body and just see it as something we're using to experience for a while,
right,
then the dream ends and we return to awareness of truth, which is that only love is the freedom to create this experience, which is love,
right,
is sourcing all of it.
right.
And just as an example, Jesus does that on the cross. He transcends body identification
Hmm.
and asks for forgiveness. And he's saying don't judge. Why? Not as a moral thing, but because if you judge, you're staying stuck in the perception of good and evil. It's
Right,
not
right, right,
knowledge of good and evil.
right.
It's because it's not knowledge.
Sure.
It's a loss of awareness. It's a perception
Well,
of things
okay.
being
So
other than
so
what they
that's I'm
are.
a little confused there, but let me just back up for a second because I feel like I have I certainly understand what you're saying, and I certainly have been able to um, put that into practice momentarily, right?
Yeah,
So in other words, I've been able to say, "Oh, I know that life is what I make it, right? And I put myself in a positive mental attitude and I skip through the day, you know what I mean? And I'm able to achieve that. It's not fake, right? I'm like
yeah,
actually in
yeah.
that state, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, cool, I'm in this state. But for me, I feel like it's momentary. So this is kind of where I talk about that conditioning. And you said to me, which was interesting, like, well, there is no conditioning
There
because
is no
it's
conditioning.
just you.
Yeah,
So I want to talk about that because I am in the awareness of what we just talked about, right? That I can put myself in that focus and say, okay, things are what I focus on. I need to focus on these loving thoughts. But it's only at 50 somewhat plus years that I've come to these realizations, and I feel like I do still have this, and I call it conditioning, but like this education or these
yeah.
experiences, right? These experiences that I've had that kind of build the way I run my existence, right? So so I
Yeah.
wonder where you exist, because I feel like you kind of have this knowledge as well, but I feel like and I will say to people out there, like, a lot of times I profess, oh my God, it's so easy. It's just so easy, right, to do and be
Yeah.
happy. And I will say that through learning meditation and certain things, like, it is work. It's not easy. It's not just, oh, I'm going to just think this. You have to learn how to think it, because I feel like when I say conditioning, that's what I'm talking about. Like, we've kind of been trained, and I know you're saying no, we haven't been trained.
Yeah. Well, that's we don't need to argue about language. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're doing, arguing about
Yeah.
language. But
Yeah.
I feel like, there is this experience that leads up to me having trouble with staying in that state where I know, oh, if I do this, everything will be great. And I know that, again, I have no doubts. I know that state exists because I've been there, but I do have trouble staying there. So I guess that's my question to you is what's and my girlfriend Janice, the quiet healer, always asks this question: what's in your toolbox? What
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you
Good question.
do?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
What
what do
actually
you
works? Yep. So a couple background things are important because the first and most essential part of this is humility.
Mhm, mhm,
I already
mhm,
said I do not know what anything is or is for.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
That means my opinion means nothing.
Right.
Like my opinion about and my statements about ideas and spiritual concepts and all that mean nothing.
Would you
Like,
equate that with, like, a loss of ego, kind of like?
yeah, it's absolutely loss of
Yeah,
ego.
yeah.
There's a great expression in Course in Miracles. This sort of so there's this radical violent split that occurs
Mhm,
in the way one thinks about things at a certain point.
mhm,
Again, just Jesus says he comes with a sword to cut away that which prevents true peace from being established.
mhm, mhm,
So, so this is what the course says. It says what you believe is that you're born into a certain societal context.
mhm,
You have certain influences, obviously parents, family, friends, school, education. And through this process, gradually through trial and error and the developmental process and all that, educational process, you develop slowly over time what would be called mature judgment.
mhm,
And that mature judgment then sees you through your life.
mhm,
Then the Course says this is all totally insane.
mhm.
That's the radical break.
Right.
Because we think that it's somehow we have the capacity based on an extraordinarily limited perspective
Right. Yeah.
to somehow come up with some concept of meaningful truth that will see us through life.
Right.
And the course it says it is radical and says all that you see is based on the past,
Right.
and your assumptions about things based on the past, and the past doesn't exist.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like, just like energy is fluent, not fluent, I guess, fluid and ever changing. So is the moment. So is existence. So, like even your belief systems, I think that's part of, I guess, and again, language where what I call the conditioning is these belief systems that you build, and not that you build these belief systems, but that you hold on to them, and
for me, this idea that there was that because that explained really how I felt. What made sense to me. You develop mature judgment as that sees you through life.
Mm-hmm.
So for the course, which is this brilliant thing to say, no, that's all totally insane,
right,
is really makes me think, well, what the heck are they talking about?
right,
And what they're talking about is, it's a little bit like our minds are experiencing these thoughts, and we latch onto this one that we hope is true, and we latch onto that one. We get really, defend this one because we'd like it to be true and all that.
right,
But
right.
being honest with ourselves, we don't really know any of it.
Right.
So
but we
okay,
give weight to the different things that we believe.
yeah. So if this way of being is insane, then what isn't? Because it's kind of like the way the whole world goes about doing its business is pretty much, I think, summarized in that statement.
Right.
You get educated in a certain way. So what the course says is, and this the analogy I use is like imagine a pond, and the pond has all these ripples on it, and the whole development of mature judgment and socialization and all that is like learning to read the ripples on the pond,
Okay.
like sign language. Oh, that means this. That means this. That means this. What, and then it changes, and it doesn't really mean that, but sometimes it does, and so you feel okay sometimes, but not others, and then some days are good and some days aren't, and that kind of thing. What the course says, you have to get rid of all of that, and you have to get still. It's like when you're going on a merry-go-round and you're trying to shoot something, you're not going to hit it, but if you're staying still, you might.
Right.
Same with ideas and understanding about things.
Sure.
So if we get the mind still, and one of the practices it says is imagine now is all there is of time.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like everything freezes, like instead of a moving image, it freezes for a second and resets. In that moment, that holy instant, they call it, things reset, our perceptions reset.
Right.
And what we find, which is a gradual process, but I found miracles happening repeatedly as a result of this experience. What we find is that, it has nothing to do with the ripples on the waves at all, the ripples or the waves on the water at all, and that's all we thought there was.
Right.
It has to do with the reflection in the still water, which we didn't even know was there.
Interesting, you said that.
The training is to learn to get still and listen to a voice, quote, not your own, unquote.
Right. And Quiet Healer says a still small voice.
Still small voice. And even like it sounds a lot like the Force, right? From Star Wars. But
absolutely.
But there's a lot of reason to believe that George Lucas had an experience of this.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
With his, he had a big accident, and he felt, that he should have died, and the whole car was crumpled up, and he was in the hospital for ages, and that's when he had this kind of epiphany around something else being present.
The Force.
And the Force talks about this is the Holy Spirit. It could be called lots of different things. In sports, it's called the zone.
Yeah.
Lots of.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time. Like, like it's like you said, like everybody believes in God, but they just call it something different.
Call it something different. Yeah.
And, we are 45 minutes in and we haven't even gotten close to talking about any of that stuff yet. And I actually I just want to back up a little bit. Because I want people to understand where you came from. And I learned this about you in our conversation, how much this book affected your life. So you keep referring to a course, the course tells you this. So tell us what that is, a course in
A Course in Miracles. Yeah,
A Course in Miracles is the book, right? Okay.
Course in Miracles is a book, and I studied it, read it exclusively for about 6 years. It has a 365-page workbook. I think it could be argued that it's the most influential book of the last 70 years. It was written in the mid 60s or 60 years. And it's influenced all kinds of people. Oprah called a book about it the most important book she ever read and promoted it heavily.
And that
I
was
haven't
written
actually
by,
studied it for 20 years, but I did for 20 years before that. So, yeah.
and that book that Oprah was talking about was written by, you were telling me?
Marianne Williamson, yeah, who's running for president. Yeah,
Oh,
Return to Love was the name of the book.
Right.
So
Right.
this is kind of like of the new age of stuff. There's so much in the new age. The Course really is kind of the granddaddy of the whole new age movement. Eckhart Tolle's work's heavily influenced by it. Deepak Chopra's influenced by it. Like lots and lots of people. Wayne Dyer's heavily influenced by it. So
right. So for the quiet healer who was asking me earlier what I wanted for the holidays, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Course in Miracles. It's kind of, I consider it kind of required reading for the new age.
Yeah, you really intrigued me on it when we were talking about it. Because
so the Course was written by an atheist Jewish woman who was a professional, medical professional in the psychiatric department at Columbia University.
Okay. Wow.
And it's 1,400 pages of small print, largely iambic pentameter, which is what Shakespeare wrote in. And the fact that it exists is like, I can't explain how it can exist. Like, it's like,
what do you mean when you say that? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, the intellectual might of it, and the
fact that somebody wrote it like it and channeled
the fact that somebody wrote it is almost incomprehensible to me. So the Course has a 600 plus page text, and then it has a 365-day workbook with which you're supposed to do not more than one a day, and it's very demanding. I mean, it's like a typical day will be about a 15-minute read maybe, and then apply the principles for the day, 5 minutes on the hour, every hour, all day.
Wow.
And that goes on for a year. That's not all, but
it sounds very very impactful.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can do the workbook without having it dramatically change their life.
Yeah.
And it says that one of the main purposes of it is to put you in the hands of your internal teacher, which it calls the Holy Spirit. And this is this still small voice I'm talking about. And then it says that will then direct your curriculum moving forward. And so that's what you depend on. Instead of this mature judgment, you depend on the still small voice. And that's a real challenge because, the earth.
It takes work. I think that's why people are starting to find meditation and yoga and these practices that all are related to ancient practices, right? That bring you back to this state of being in touch with the energy of yourself. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. The energy is really important. I will say that I believe that that all of these things are like downstream, if you will, from what you're choosing to put your attention on. And it's really important because there is we sort of have this dedication to having this experience of this, what the Course calls a dream of separation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a mistake.
Right.
The fact that we're choosing to explore what would it be like to have a universe of good and evil.
Sure.
There isn't a universe of good and evil, but we're imagining one.
Sure. So let me ask you a question, because again, I feel like I've certainly been able to achieve this state of gratitude and humility and existing in a very happy, blissful way, experiencing joy as a person and try to affect other people that way. Now I forgot what I was going to say. It was something I was going to ask you about, how you kind of got to where you are and how it affects you. Oh, I guess what I was going to say was, how do you I'm thinking so many different things. My brain is firing right now. It's tough, right?
Oh yeah.
And so again, I guess I'm kind of going back to, what maybe you have some sort of tricks or something, or what's in your toolbox. But before I even go in that direction, I want to pop up your website. I want to talk about how this all led you to what you do, to what you're doing, like for a living, what you basically do.
Well, Michael, how about we do the toolbox thing first? Because I
Okay.
want to, I think it's important. It's very much how I think too, because
Good.
I had no
Excellent.
intention of like being a spiritual teacher or anything. I just had this kind of collapse into hell unexpectedly in my teenage years, and I had to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that was interesting to me was the truth, because it was the only thing that was consistent, if there was one. So I'm very interested in like what is practical in the moment. So humility is essential, that you don't know what anything is for, because that means you'll be open-minded. There's a great statement in the course. It says, well, at least if you're upset, you can at least admit that you're unhappy, and so you'd be better off if you were wrong. And up until then, everybody's thinking they're happy by being right, but oh wow, I'd be better off being wrong. Wow.
Right.
That's like live in that space.
Right. Wait a second, I'm not unhappy. I'm actually happy.
Yeah, right. So if you say, well, I am struggling with something, so it really is the process of purification of the unloving thoughts that you're allowing to live in your mind. That's and they're largely subconscious or unconscious, whatever. So when we find obstacles or in suffering and struggles and conflict in life, love doesn't need to be helped. It's going to do its own thing on its own.
Okay.
But the places that we're suffering and struggling are places where we still have unloving thoughts.
Okay.
In our minds.
Okay.
And it might be something as simple as, I'll have an example. Like, no one will ever know who this was. Maybe I won't, because it was from a private session. But basically, so a judgment is the belief something should be different. So anytime you believe something should be different, you can argue forever whether it should be or not. Yeah. But if you're being humble and saying, well, I don't know what anything is or is for, well, I can't say that I know for sure.
Right.
Because I don't know I don't know everything that's happening.
Right.
I mean, there's a horrible war taking place, but maybe it prevented a nuclear war. We don't know.
Right. Yep. I get it. I totally get it. Yep.
Yeah. All the time we don't know. So we might as well just like be open-minded and say, well, I don't know. So I don't know if something should be different.
Right.
But the suffering, we suffer because we resolutely believe that things should.
Okay. And you know what? So now, so what's coming to me, I like this. We're kind of working together. What's coming to me is that's the tool for just kind of saying, wait a second, everything is exactly as it should be. Or maybe it
is. Yeah.
Or maybe it is. But, regardless of if it is or isn't, it is. Because
I'm better off if it is.
Right. Exactly.
I knew this guy who was let's just say somebody's suffering with depression.
Yeah.
I'm making this up. And they go all around everything, and he says, but I'm still really depressed. I'm sorry, I'm going to switch this to eating, because this is a specific thing.
Okay.
But I've got an eating problem.
Okay.
I'm overweight. I got an eating problem, and it applies to the depression thing too.
Sure.
So it's like, well, okay. So the reality is, I like to eat chocolate eclairs every day, and I'm 20 pounds overweight. Okay, and you're convinced that that's a problem. Well, how do you know? Like, maybe you're eating 5 eclairs a day and being 20 pounds overweight is actually a form of holy perfection at the moment.
Right.
Maybe things would be worse if it was different. Maybe if it were different at all, they'd be worse. So would you be willing to consider the idea that you don't have an eating problem, you have a thinking problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you don't have okay, somebody's depressed. You say, okay, you're depressed a lot. Yeah, I'm depressed a lot. They say, okay, are you cool with that?
Right.
They'll go, well, no. I mean, everybody tells me I shouldn't be depressed.
Right.
And you're like, well, how do you know? I mean, you are. So, I mean, up until now, I'm not talking about the future, but up until now, you've been depressed 2 hours a day for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you be better off if that was the way it
Supposed to
should
be.
be?
Right. Right. Right.
And you can see, like, on the surface, but finding the specific things that we're really attached to believing,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the work comes in.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow.
So a great question to ask is, like, if I'm going to accept the most loving reality, which is that I'm free, God just says, yes, I'm free. Then the question would always be, that's so interesting. Like, I'm confronting a situation I think I don't want,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or I wish were different.
Right.
Anything, right? Well, that's so interesting. Like, I'm so sure I don't want this to be the case, but how is it what I want? Because it must be.
There you go. I talk about, and I don't mean to jump right to this, but I talk about accountability all the time. You know what I mean? And again, it's easy sometimes to look outside of yourself and see, oh, this person's doing this person's doing that. But a lot of the stuff we're talking about here, it's like, oh man, yeah, I still have a lot of work to do. I've got to take care of this. I've got to take care of this.
So in other words, no one's doing anything. All that's happening, this is a great way to look at it, is that the universe, God, however you want to put it, is creating events for you to help you heal your consciousness mess.
Yeah.
So everything that's happening, once you set an intention to awaken, everything that's happening is literally being created for you. I know the universe works this way. I've seen it.
Sure. Yeah,
it's incredibly miraculous.
Right.
The thing I would give the strongest testimony to of anything I've seen is that the universe will arrange itself for the learning of that individual.
Right. Right. Right.
You can predict future events based on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, if you think, like, if you're in a holodeck and you're having a problem with bin Laden, the problem is not bin Laden. Bin Laden is just an aspect of your conflict.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of, it's like Matrixy, but
I love that you keep using that Star Trek reference that you're like.
Yeah, well, popular culture obviously is reflecting this.
Yeah.
Avatar is a great one, because he's getting lost into this belief he's this thing.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting lost into the belief we're this thing.
Yeah.
Same way.
Absolutely.
That's the idea, at least.
Absolutely. And so, oh my God, I didn't even realize we're already at an hour, so we got to start wrapping it up. But I have so many burning questions, Dave. I cannot tell you how much I enjoy talking to you. You really make me stretch my own thought process, like past what I even expect.
Well, tell you what, I enjoy being here. Thanks. Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm going to have to ask you if you want to come back, and I'm hoping that you'll say yes. And maybe
sure, I'll come back. Yeah.
Because I really wanted to discuss. I mean, we haven't even discussed your channeling, and I really wanted to get into a little bit of a theological discussion about what you feel like the connection is between religion and spirituality. I love that you embody both. You know what I mean? I feel like, because I do feel like they're the same thing. They're just different expressions of the same thing.
Yeah, I think that people are, and science is the same. People are striving for meaning. They're striving to connect with meaning and with their creator and with life, and that's what they have in common, And then there's fear, and there's love, and there's truth, and that which isn't, and ego is everywhere. Like, ego saturates every aspect. That's the one commonality in the world. It doesn't matter if you're homeless or a brilliant scientist or
Do you
So,
think ego is part of why a lot of people look outside of themselves for answers to things, like what's happening to them, and like and looking for happiness outside of themselves and that kind
yeah.
of thing?
Well, that's the idea that the course calls it the dream of separation.
Hmm.
So it's the idea that we're in this universe where lots of separate things are happening and affecting us.
Right.
Clearly, we believe. I mean, I believe
Yep.
that.
Yep. Yep. That's what it
Uh,
feels like. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not stress free when the bank account's low. I mean, a
Right.
lot of the
Right.
time I'm not because I've had a lot of practice, or various other things going on. But but that's completely contrary to the first axiom.
Yeah.
First axiom says, I and I alone am creating every aspect of my experience, period, whether I'm 2 months old or whether I'm 95 years old or 23 or whatever race, gender, social position makes no difference, has no impact whatsoever. There is only the ultimate and perfect freedom of what could be called the child of God.
Right.
That may or may not be true, but it's the best possible universe. So I think it's
It's
worth
the
really.
best truth. Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I love
Otherwise,
that.
you're in a universe in which you can be a victim, and that's a bigger problem. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. You know what? I was going to ask you for like some words of wisdom, but I think that those are it. That's it right there. Is
hey, yeah, but words of wisdom are, I do not know what anything is or is for, so get still and listen.
get still and listen. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Learn to stop trusting your mind and start learning to trust the stillness. Yeah, because the mind won't solve anything. I mean, I've used a lot of words, but it's almost like the words are used to negate the words. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And to make sure the mind doesn't take over too much, you got to go back into breath,
Yeah.
which helps establish stillness.
Yeah.
There's a very strong connection between this still small voice and relaxed deep breathing
Hmm. Hmm.
and breath awareness.
Yeah.
So then you start experimenting with, well, what if I do what it says? And then you're like, what my little voice is saying, do this. And I'm like,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
really? Like, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't seem like a good idea.
Right.
And then there's this sort of journey of trying it out. Let's see, well, what
Right.
happens if I do that?
Right.
And it started proving itself to me that the course says the Holy Spirit has the still small voice awareness, has dominion over time and space. And it proved
Wow.
to me that it does.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you I'm imagining you work with people one-on-one. I know I would
Yeah.
definitely say, Helen, you might want to give Dave a call. I feel like he could help you out with what you were talking about. Spirituality is personal. I agree. You know what? And I think your religion can also be personal. Your brain is itchy. Helen's brain is itchy.
Yeah. Well, itchy brains can be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, if it's not really self-promotion, but there's a process, a step-by-step process, which is designed to uncover the unloving thoughts that have often been living in the mind for what I think are many lifetimes.
Mhm, mhm,
And it's a very step-by-step. It incorporates this wisdom of the Holy Spirit breath. Holy Spirit's not a religious term here.
mhm,
It's more like this interconnectivity with this sort of field of light, wisdom, and beingness that we connect to via breath.
mhm, mhm.
But it incorporates that wisdom, not just the brain mind thinking, because it involves breathing and emotional awareness and stuff. And I love it because I'm very passionate about teaching this,
Mhm.
because it has people have dramatic experiences like every session
Wow.
practically,
That's
which is
awesome. I love that. That's awesome. And the Quiet Healer says, if it seems crazy and outlandish, then it's most likely what you should do.
it could be, yeah.
That could be.
I don't know. I don't know what anything is or is for. So yeah, it could be.
Yes. Tim, I just want to give a shout out. Tim says, all I got to do is look around at Sonia and Taryn. That's his wife and his son. To
Wow.
know without a doubt I'm in the best possible universe.
That's an enlightened guy right there. Yeah.
Tim is an enlightened guy for sure. And everybody out here in the audience is appreciating you in the comments. So I can't tell you how great this conversation was, and definitely
Nice
going to have
chatting
you
with
back.
you.
I would love to have you back, and even if you channel through this medium, I would love to see if you want to do something like that. But
Yeah, it could be done. Yep,
let's,
yep.
let's,
Yeah, no,
let's
there are lots of whole other stories, but this is kind of fun because like I don't really do the theological. People are sick of listening. You're hearing about that generally with me. So,
yeah.
but it's been my journey and I enjoy it.
I love the connection between the theological and the science and the spirituality. It's all knowledge that is all going to connect at some point, right? So
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of scientists, and I think it's helpful to be able to talk in ways which are take into account the kind of the scientific process it's absolutely important because thinking is clearly is important. There's a role for discernment in all this. What's true and what's not? That's the essential question.
right.
And then we start experimenting with what might be, and see where it takes us.
Awesome, David. I'm going to put you in the green room. Thanks again for being here.
Nice
I'm gonna
chatting.
sign
Thanks
off.
for having me.
So hang in there, and I'll talk to you after the show.
All right, peace.
I'll
Yep.
talk to you soon. Peace. Oh man, wow. My brain isn't itchy. My brain is tingling. My brain is feeling really good. I love the conversation that Dave brings to the table. Thanks so much, Dave. Yes, Ninja Kitty. Wonderful. And we didn't, like I said, we didn't even really get too much into David's specialty. We didn't even talk about his artwork. He's a painter, and he runs an art gallery. And wow, so many things we didn't talk to. So I'm excited to have him back. And thank you, Ninja Kitty. Another amazing show. I love when you say that because I feel like it's amazing. So I the fact that you also feel like it's amazing means that we did a good job. Obrigado. I love when Tim speaks Portuguese. David, great episode. Much love. Definitely much love to you. And Helen is tingling, itching, the same. Helen, take care of your brain. Whatever you do tonight, just take care of your brain. And I will see you guys next week. Let me take a quick look at my calendar. Oh, opening up. Oh, I won't see you guys next week. Next week is Thanksgiving. I'm going to be having a wonderful meal at my buddy Steve Sage's house with his family and Janice and her son Jeffrey. So you guys enjoy Thanksgiving. The week I come back, I've got the real Brimstone. So this guy he's an ex-wrestler. He's got a podcast, a great podcast. He's been doing some acting. He's a pretty cool dude. And I'm excited to have him on the show. So he's going to be coming on November 30th, I believe is the date. Yes, it is. And then the week after that, I've got Jeffrey Wands coming to the show. Yes, he's a psychic medium here on Long Island who is pretty well known. So I was very happy to get him to come on the show. Jeffrey Wands will be December 7th. All right, guys. Well, it was great to see everybody. Thank you guys for being here, contributing all your energy. And I will see you next week. No, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I just said that because I'm used to saying it, but I'll see you in 2 weeks. Peace.